All right, so today we're diving into a paper, and it's quite a title, Towards an AI Co-Scientist. Now, I know that sounds a little bit like something out of science fiction, but trust me, this is a real thing, and it has the potential to really change how we do science.
It really does. And, one of the things that's so interesting about this paper is that it introduces this AI system that goes beyond just, summarizing research.
Hmm.
This AI is actually designed to be a real collaborator for scientists and help them generate hypotheses and even come up with experiments to test those hypotheses.
So it's not just crunching numbers, it's like actually like participating in the scientific process.
That's right.
And the researchers actually put this AI co-scientist to the test in three pretty complex areas of biomedical research:
Hmm.
drug repurposing and finding new targets for treatments, and then also tackling this challenge of antimicrobial resistance.
And the results are really quite impressive. But before we kind of jump into the specific, I think it's important to understand, what exactly is this AI co-scientist and how does it actually work?
Okay, let's break it down. They describe this AI as a multi-agent system. Now, what does that even mean?
So think of it like a team of specialized AI agents. And each of these agents has its own kind of unique skill set. And they're all working together under the guidance of a supervisor agent. So this supervisor is kind of like, the lead researcher in the lab, coordinating the efforts of all the different members of the team.
So instead of like a lab full of postdocs and grad students, you've got these AI agents running experiments and analyzing data. That's pretty wild. And what about this test time compute paradigm? They mentioned this. It sounds pretty technical.
It is a little technical, but the concept is actually pretty simple.
Mm.
Basically, it means that this AI co-scientist is designed to continuously learn and improve as it comes across new information. So it's not a static system. It's actually constantly evolving and becoming more sophisticated over time.
So the more it learns, the better it gets at doing science. That's pretty remarkable. And importantly, this is not about like replacing human scientists, right? This is
Absolutely not.
about helping them.
This AI co-scientist is designed to work with scientists, not replace them. It's all about collaboration and augmenting human capabilities.
Okay, so let's get into some specific examples of how this AI co-scientist actually performs in these three different biomedical areas that we talked about. Let's start with drug repurposing. Now, for our listeners who might not be familiar with that term, could you just quickly explain what is drug repurposing?
Sure. So drug repurposing is essentially finding new uses for existing drugs. So instead of developing a brand new drug, which is a very time-consuming and expensive process, we can potentially use existing drugs for new purposes.
So it's kind of like finding like a hidden treasure in your medicine cabinet.
That's a great analogy.
That's awesome.
And in this case, the AI co-scientist was tasked with finding potential repurposed drugs for acute myeloid leukemia, or AML, and this is a particularly aggressive type of blood cancer.
And did it find anything promising?
It did. The AI actually identified an existing drug called KRA6 that showed some really promising results in lab experiments. It actually inhibited the growth of AML cells, which is a significant finding.
So how did the AI actually make this discovery? Did it just like randomly stumble upon KRA6?
Not at all. So the AI co-scientist uses a very sophisticated process to analyze huge amounts of data and identify potential connections that human researchers might miss. So in the case of KRA6, it was able to identify this previously unknown link between this drug and the specific biological pathways involved in AML.
So it's not just about having access to more data, it's about the AI's ability to kind of like see the patterns and make these connections that we might not be able to see. That's really remarkable.
It is. And what's particularly exciting about this finding is that it was completely novel. The potential use of KRA6 for AML was not something that was previously known. So this is a very clear example of how this AI co-scientist can contribute to accelerating scientific discovery.
All right, so we've seen how this AI can help with drug repurposing. Let's move on to the next challenge. Uncovering entirely new treatment targets for diseases. Now, I imagine this is even more complex than just simply finding new uses for existing drugs.
You're absolutely right. So this is where we're not just looking for new applications of existing tools, but we're actually trying to find completely new points of intervention in the body to actually target diseases.
So it's like searching for like a hidden doorway that we didn't even know existed.
And that's a great way to put it. And for this challenge, the AI co-scientist was tasked with finding new treatment targets for liver fibrosis. And this is a very serious condition that can lead to liver failure.
Okay, and what did it come up with?
Well, the AI co-scientist was able to identify three novel epigenetic targets. Now, to understand what that means, Imagine that our DNA is like a blueprint for our bodies.
Yeah.
So these epigenetic targets are essentially switches that can turn certain genes on or off. So by targeting these switches, we can potentially influence how our bodies function and develop new therapies for diseases.
So the AI found like 3 new switches that could potentially be flipped to treat liver fibrosis. That's incredible.
It is. And to validate these predictions, researchers actually tested drugs targeting 2 of these epigenetic targets in lab experiments. And remarkably, they found that these drugs did indeed show antifibrotic activity. So in other words, the AI's predictions were confirmed by real-world experiments.
Wow, that's a huge validation of the AI co-scientist's capabilities. It's
Yeah.
not just generating hypotheses, it's actually guiding the direction of future research.
Exactly. And this is where we start to see the real potential of this technology. It's not just about analyzing data, it's about using that data to make real-world impact.
Okay, now for the final challenge, understanding the mechanisms behind antimicrobial resistance. Now, this is something we hear a lot about these days. Can you just remind our listeners what is antimicrobial resistance and why is it such a big concern?
Of course. Antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, is the ability of microbes, like bacteria, to resist the effects of drugs that are designed to kill them, like antibiotics. So it's a growing global health threat because as microbes become resistant to our existing drugs, we're losing our ability to treat infections effectively.
So it's like a constant arms race between us and the microbes, and they're starting to win.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And for this challenge, the AI co-scientist was given a very specific research goal: to understand how certain genetic elements, called CFP-ICIs, help bacteria spread antibiotic resistance.
So these CFP-SCIs are like these secret weapons that bacteria use to evade our antibiotics.
You could say that. And what's really remarkable is that the AI co-scientist was able to independently propose a hypothesis about how these CFP-ICIs work that actually matched the unpublished findings of expert researchers.
Wait, so the AI essentially figured out something that human scientists had already discovered but hadn't yet published? How was that even possible?
It's really a testament to the power of this AI co-scientist and its ability to analyze vast amounts of data and identify patterns. So it was able to piece together information from various sources and arrive at a conclusion that aligned with the latest scientific understanding.
That's pretty mind-blowing. It sounds like this AI is capable of making genuine scientific discoveries, even in incredibly complex areas like antimicrobial resistance. So the AI hypothesized that these CFP-ICIs were somehow interacting with viruses.
Yes. Specifically, it hypothesized that these CFP-ICIs interact with different phage tails. Now, phage tails are parts of viruses that infect bacteria, and the AI's hypothesis was that this interaction allows the CFP-ICIs to spread to a wider range of bacterial species.
So these tiny genetic elements are hijacking viruses to spread antibiotic resistance. It's a pretty scary thought.
It is, and it highlights the urgency of finding new ways to combat antimicrobial resistance. The fact that this AI co-scientist was able to independently arrive at this hypothesis is a real testament to its potential as a tool for accelerating research in this very critical area.
So we've seen this AI co-scientist in action tackling 3 very different and complex biomedical challenges. What's the overall verdict? Did it pass the test?
I'd say it passed with flying colors. But it's important to remember that this AI co-scientist is still under development. It has limitations just like any tool.
So what are some of those limitations? What should we be aware of as we consider the potential of this technology?
One key limitation is that the AI co-scientist relies heavily on existing data. It can only learn from the information that it's given. And if there are gaps in that data or biases in the research or even important findings that just haven't been published yet, the AI might miss some really critical insights.
So it's kind of like trying to bake a cake without all the ingredients. You might end up with something that looks like a cake, but it might not taste quite right.
Exactly. And another limitation is that this AI can't actually go into a lab and conduct experiments on its own. It can suggest experiments, based on the data it's analyzed, but it still relies on human scientists to actually carry them out.
So it's more of like a superpowered research assistant than like a fully independent scientist at this point. But I imagine that could change as the technology continues to develop.
You're right. And the researchers are already working on ways to address these limitations. They're exploring how to incorporate more diverse data sources, including unpublished research and even, negative results, which could significantly enhance the AI's insights.
That makes sense. The more information it has access to, the better equipped it will be to make those connections and generate those hypotheses. So while it's not quite ready to take over the lab, it sounds like it's well on its way to becoming an invaluable tool for scientists.
Absolutely. And remember we talked earlier about this AI being a multi-agent system. Well, the way these agents work together is actually quite fascinating.
Yeah, you mentioned something about like a team of specialized agents, each with its own kind of role to play. Could you elaborate on that a bit? I'm curious to know how this like AI team actually functions.
Sure. So within this multi-agent system, you have different agents that are responsible for specific tasks. So there's a generation agent that comes up with these initial hypotheses, and then you have a reflection agent that critically evaluates those hypotheses, and then a ranking agent that prioritizes the most promising ones.
So it's like having a built-in scientific peer review process happening within the AI system itself.
It is.
That's pretty cool.
And then, of course, you have the supervisor agent, which kind of oversees this whole process. So it's like the principal investigator in a lab assigning tasks to the other agents and making sure everything's running smoothly.
So it's a very like structured and organized system. But it's not just the AI working in isolation, right? You mentioned earlier that human feedback is incorporated into the process as well.
That's a crucial point. This system is designed to constantly interact with human scientists, and it learns from their expertise, and it refines its approach based on their input. So it's a real, true collaboration with the AI and the human researchers working together to advance scientific knowledge.
That's reassuring to hear. It's not about AI replacing humans. It's about AI and humans working together, each contributing their own unique strengths. And that's what makes this research so exciting. It's not just about developing cool new AI technology, it's about fundamentally changing the way we do science, making it faster and more efficient and ultimately more impactful.
Precisely. And to really understand the potential impact of this AI co-scientist, we need to dig a bit deeper into how it actually works. We've talked about the multi-agent system, we've talked about the test time compute paradigm, but where does this AI actually get its information from in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not like it can just go out and do field research like a human scientist can.
You're right. The AI co-scientist primarily draws its information from the huge amount of scientific literature that's publicly available. So essentially reading and analyzing, countless research papers, extracting key findings and looking for connections and patterns that might not be immediately obvious to human researchers.
So it's like a super-powered research assistant that can read through thousands of papers in the blink of an eye and then synthesize all of that information into something meaningful.
That's a good analogy.
Right.
But it goes beyond just summarizing information. The AI is actually able to reason about what it's learned and form hypotheses and even suggest new experiments based on its analysis.
And that's where the real power of this system lies. It's not just regurgitating what's already known, it's actually helping to push the boundaries of scientific knowledge, uncovering new connections and opening up these new avenues for research. It's almost like having an extra brain in the lab, constantly churning through data and coming up with new ideas.
It is, and it's important to remember that this technology is still in its very early stages. As these large language models continue to evolve, this AI co-scientist will only become more sophisticated and more capable.
That's both exciting and a little bit daunting, isn't it? The possibilities seem almost limitless, but it's crucial to approach this technology with a lot of caution and responsibility.
Absolutely. We need to be having these conversations now to really think about the ethical implications, the potential risks and benefits, and to make sure that we're developing this technology in a way that aligns with our values.
I couldn't agree more. It's not about letting AI take over. It's about finding ways for AI and humans to work together to augment our capabilities and to ensure that AI is actually used for the benefit of humanity.
Exactly. And that kind of brings us back to the core of this research. This AI co-scientist is really designed to be a partner to human scientists, a collaborator, not a competitor.
It's about enhancing human intelligence, not replacing it. Now, I know this AI co-scientist was put through some pretty rigorous testing. Can you tell us a bit more about how the researchers actually evaluated its performance?
The evaluation was really quite comprehensive, so they used a combination of automated assessments within the AI system itself, feedback from human experts, and perhaps most importantly, real-world wet lab experiments to validate the AI's predictions.
So they didn't just rely on the AI's own self-evaluation. They actually went into the lab and tested the hypotheses that the AI had generated. That's a pretty high bar.
It is. And remember, this was done across those three distinct and complex biomedical areas we discussed earlier: drug repurposing, novel target discovery, and antimicrobial resistance.
Right. And we talked about those specific examples, the AI identifying Cure-IS6 for AML and uncovering those novel treatment targets for liver fibrosis. But I'm curious about the kind of broader evaluation. How did the AI co-scientist perform overall? Was it able to kind of hold its own against human scientists?
Well, one of the ways that they assessed the AI's performance was by using a ranking system called ELO, which is commonly used in, competitive games like chess. This allowed them to compare the AI's hypotheses and research proposals to those generated by other state-of-the-art AI models, as well as to the best guesses provided by human experts.
So it was like a scientific showdown, AI versus AI, and AI versus human.
In a way, yes. And the AI co-scientist consistently outperformed the other AI models, and it even surpassed the human experts in some cases.
Wow. That's impressive. It sounds like this AI co-scientist is a real contender in the world of scientific research.
It is. But it's important to remember that this ELO rating is just one metric, and it's really important to also consider the qualitative feedback from the human experts. And overall, they were quite positive about the AI co-scientist's performance. They found its hypotheses to be novel and impactful and well supported by evidence.
So it wasn't just about winning a competition. It was about generating these genuinely valuable and insightful scientific ideas. And that's what ultimately matters.
Exactly. Now, we've talked a lot about this research focusing on these three specific areas of biomedicine, but the potential applications of this AI co-scientist actually extend far beyond that.
Right, because the underlying principles of the scientific method are universal. Whether you're studying cancer or climate change or the origins of the universe, the same basic steps apply. Observe, hypothesize, test, analyze.
Precisely. So this AI co-scientist could potentially be applied to any field of scientific inquiry with the potential to accelerate discovery and drive innovation across a wide range of disciplines.
That's a truly mind-boggling thought. Imagine AI co-scientists working alongside researchers in every field, helping us unlock new knowledge and solve some of the world's most pressing problems. What are some other areas where you think this technology could have a really huge impact?
Well, just to give you a few examples, imagine this AI helping to develop new renewable energy sources or designing more sustainable agricultural practices, or even aiding in the search for extraterrestrial life.
Wow, the possibilities really are endless. It's like we're on the verge of this new era of scientific discovery, an era where AI will play an increasingly important role in shaping our understanding of the world and our place in it.
It is an exciting time. This AI co-scientist is a powerful testament to the transformative potential of artificial intelligence. It's a glimpse into a future where the boundaries of human knowledge are constantly being pushed and where the pace of scientific discovery is accelerated beyond anything we've ever seen before.
It's a future full of possibilities, and I, for one, am eager to see what discoveries await us. But with this incredible potential comes a huge responsibility. We need to make sure that this technology is developed and used ethically and thoughtfully, ensuring that it benefits all of humanity.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations now to really think about the potential impact of AI on society and to work together to shape a future where AI and humans can thrive together.
It really does feel like we're on the cusp of something pretty groundbreaking here. But before we get too carried away with all the possibilities, I think it's important to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the limitations of this technology. We talked about the AI's reliance on existing data and its inability to conduct experiments independently. Are there any other limitations that we should kind of be aware of?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that even though this AI co-scientist is incredibly sophisticated, it's still essentially a tool. It's a tool that can amplify human ingenuity and accelerate our scientific progress, but it's not a magic bullet.
So it's not about AI taking over science, but rather about AI and humans working together, each bringing their own, unique strengths to the table.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important point to emphasize. This AI is designed to complement and enhance human capabilities, not to replace them.
Right. It's like the difference between using a calculator to do complex math and actually understanding the underlying mathematical concepts. The calculator can be incredibly helpful, but it doesn't replace the need for human understanding and insight.
That's a great analogy. And in the same way, this AI co-scientist can help us analyze vast amounts of data and generate hypotheses. But it's still up to human scientists to interpret those findings, to design and conduct experiments, and to ultimately draw those meaningful conclusions.
So it's not about AI versus humans. It's about AI and humans working together as a team to advance scientific knowledge.
Precisely. And I think that's really where the true excitement lies. This collaboration between AI and humans has the potential to lead to breakthroughs that we could never have imagined on our own.
Now, while there are limitations to this technology, it's clear that the potential is just enormous. As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious to hear your perspective on what you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners. What should they be thinking about as they consider the implications of this AI co-scientist?
Well, I think if we kind of connect this back to the bigger picture, I think the most important takeaway is that AI is not just a technological advancement. It's a fundamental shift in the way we approach knowledge and discovery. This AI co-scientist is a powerful example of how AI is transforming the scientific landscape. And this transformation will have profound implications for all of us, not just within the scientific community.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it really underscores the importance of engaging with AI, not just from a technical perspective, but also from a societal and ethical perspective.
Exactly. We need to be having these conversations now, asking those tough questions and ensuring that the development and deployment of AI align with our values and our aspirations for the future.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating discussion. So what does this all mean for you, our listeners?
Yeah.
We've explored this really exciting world of the AI co-scientist, a powerful tool that has the potential to revolutionize scientific discovery. But as we navigate this new era of AI-driven science, it's crucial to approach it thoughtfully and responsibly, ensuring that AI is used for good and that its benefits are shared widely.
It's an exciting time full of possibilities and challenges, and I truly believe that by working together, by engaging in this thoughtful dialogue and collaboration, we can harness the power of AI to create a better future for all of humanity.
And that's where we'll leave it for today. We encourage you to think critically about the potential of AI in science and to consider the broader implications for society as a whole. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of